December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor Naval Base, Hawaii. The humid dawn air hung heavy over the airfield, thick with the scent of salt water and aviation fuel. Sirens wailed in the distance, piercing the tropical calm like a knife through silk. Lieutenant Commander John "Hawk" Harlan gripped the edge of his desk in the dimly lit operations tent, his knuckles white against the scarred wood. The radio crackled to life, spitting out fragmented reports in bursts of static. Incoming aircraft. Zeros. Multiple squadrons. Outside, the first rays of sun glinted off the wings of parked P-40 Warhawks, their olive-drab fuselages still dewed from the night. Harlan's heart pounded as he scanned the room. Ensign Maria Reyes, his sharp-eyed intelligence officer, hunched over a map, her pencil scratching urgent notes. Captain Elias Thorne, the base commander, burst through the flap, his uniform rumpled, face etched with the lines of a man who'd seen too many drills turn real. "What the hell is this?" Thorne barked, slamming a fist on the table. The tent shuddered as distant explosions rocked the harbor. Japanese carriers had slipped through the net, their dive bombers screaming down like avenging spirits. You could feel it then, that electric tension coiling in your gut, the world narrowing to the thrum of engines overhead. Harlan straightened, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Sir, we've got inbound from the north-northeast. Radar's lighting up like a Christmas tree, but look at this." He jabbed a finger at a blueprint spread across the desk, a sleek experimental fighter design, the XP-47 Thunderbolt prototype, rejected just weeks ago by higher command in Washington. They called it a flying brick, too heavy, too slow on the climb. But if we arm it right... Thorne's eyes narrowed, the roar of anti-aircraft guns outside punctuating his scoff. Rejected means scrapped. "Harlan, we don't have time for your pet projects. Get those P-40s in the air. Standard protocol." The ground trembled again, closer this time as a fuel truck erupted in flames beyond the tent. Shrapnel pinged against the canvas walls, and Reyes ducked instinctively, her dark hair falling across her face. Harlan's mind raced. He'd poured months into that bird, arguing with brass back east that its 8-50 caliber machine guns and radial engine could punch through any Zero if only they'd let it fly. But no. Budget cuts, politics, the usual rot. Now, with the sky filling with red rising suns on wings, regret tasted like bile. The attack unfolded in brutal waves. From your vantage, huddled in the trench lines hastily dug around the hangars, you'd see the Aichi D-3A Vals peeling off in steep dives, their sirens howling like banshees. Bombs whistled down, cratering the runway in geysers of earth and asphalt. Harlan sprinted toward Hangar 3, dodging debris, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes. Inside, mechanics swarmed the prototype, its massive frame dwarfing the standard fighters. The XP-47 sat there, unpainted aluminum gleaming under the flickering lights, its four-bladed propeller still, waiting like a caged beast. "Get her started!" Harlan yelled over the din, climbing into the cockpit. The ground crew hesitated. Orders were clear: no untested aircraft in combat. But Reyes appeared at his side, shoving a clipboard into his hands. "Captain Thorne's on the radio, sir. He's authorizing it." "Barely. Says if you crash it, it's on you." Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned with that fierce determination he'd come to rely on. Harlan nodded, flipping switches. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine coughed to life, belching blue smoke that filled the hangar. Vibrations rattled through the frame, the gauges flickering as fuel pumps whirred. Outside, the second wave hit. You imagine the fear then. Pilots scrambling into their cockpits, props spinning up in a symphony of urgency. Zeros strafed the field, their 20mm cannons chewing through parked planes in bursts of fire and twisted metal. Harlan taxied out, the Thunderbolt's weight making it lumber at first, tires grinding over shattered concrete. His hands trembled on the stick, not from doubt, But from the raw power thrumming beneath him, clearance came in a frantic squawk. "Thunderbolt 1, you're cleared hot, Godspeed." As he roared down the runway, dodging craters, the world blurred into a rush of wind and adrenaline. Lifting off, the plane strained against gravity, its climb sluggish, just as the brass had predicted. But then at 2,000 feet, something shifted. The engine hit its stride, pushing him into the fray. Below, the harbor burned, battleships listing in oily flames, the USS Arizona a funeral pyre. Harlan banked left, spotting a pair of Zeros vectoring toward a fleeing PBY Catalina. His thumb hovered over the trigger. The first burst from the 8 guns lit up the sky, traces arcing like deadly fireworks. 1-0 shredded in mid-air, its wing folding like paper, spiraling into the sea in a plume of foam. The second veered, but Harlan pursued, the Thunderbolt's armor shrugging off glancing hits from its pursuers. You feel the G-forces then, pressing you back into the seat, the cockpit alive with the chatter of guns and the whine of the supercharger. For a moment, amid the smoke and screams, this rejected machine became salvation, a terror in its own right, clawing back the sky one enemy at a time. But as the sun climbed higher, more waves darkened the horizon. Harlan's radio hissed with desperate calls. "Bandits at 3 o'clock! Fuel low!" The prototype had bought them time, but the real fight was just igniting. How long could one dismissed dream hold the line? If you're gripped by stories like this, hit that subscribe button and give it a like to dive deeper into the skies of World War II. Dogfights over the burning harbor. The sky above Pearl Harbor fractured into chaos as Harlan's Thunderbolt clawed higher, its massive engine roaring defiance against the swarm of Japanese aircraft. It was still December 7th, 1941, mere minutes after liftoff. But the world had tilted into nightmare. Black smoke billowed from the docks below, twisting like serpents into the clear blue, carrying the sharp tang of burning oil and ruptured fuel tanks. Harlan's gloved hands tightened on the control stick, sweat beading under his flight helmet, despite the rush of cool air through the canopy cracks. The radio in his ear buzzed with overlapping voices, pilots screaming positions, ground crews pleading for air cover, the staccato bursts of AA fire punctuating the din like erratic drum beats. You can almost hear it, that relentless hum of the R-2800 Double Wasp, vibrating through the armored cockpit, drowning out the doubts. The XP-47 wasn't built for grace. It was a brute. 8 tons of steel and fury, designed to take punishment and dish it back tenfold. Harlan leveled off at 5,000 feet, scanning the horizon through the gun sight. The second wave was thicker now, dozens of A6M0s weaving like hornets, their red insignias flashing in the sun, escorting Nakajima B-5N Kates that droned toward the carriers in Ford Island's channel. One P-40 from the 47th Pursuit Squadron streaked past, trailing smoke from a wing root hit, its pilot banking desperately to evade a Zero's tail chase. "Thunderbolt 1, this is Control." Rhea's voice cut through the static, steady but edged with urgency. She'd stayed on the ground, coordinating from the ops tent amid the rubble, her maps now splattered with coffee and ash. "You've got 3 bandits on your 6, closing fast. Climb if you can. Evasive." Harlan didn't need telling twice. He yanked the stick, the Thunderbolt responding with a sluggish roll that would have doomed a lighter fighter, but its weight was its shield. As the Zeros opened fire, 20mm shells hammered the rear fuselage, sparks flying off the thick armor plate behind the pilot's seat. The impacts jolted him forward, gauges flickering. But the plane held. No fire, no critical hits, just the satisfying thud of enemy rounds glancing harmlessly away. "Not today," Harlan muttered, feeding throttle and pulling into a steep spiral. The supercharger whined, boosting power as altitude bled away, but he looped under the pursuers, emerging on the belly of the lead Zero. His thumb depressed the trigger. The 8 Browning AN-M2 50-caliber machine guns erupted in unison, a thunderous symphony that shook the airframe. Tracers lanced out, stitching across the Zero's slender wing. Fabric tore, fuel lines ruptured, and the fighter blossomed into an orange fireball. Debris raining down toward the roiling waters below. The other two Zeros scattered, their pilots caught off guard by the prototype's raw firepower. Harlan pressed the advantage, diving after the trailing one, the Thunderbolt's speed building to over 400 miles per hour in the plunge. Wind howled over the canopy, the harbor shrinking to a patchwork of flames and foam far beneath. On the ground, Captain Thorne watched from a foxhole near the hangar, binoculars pressed to his eyes, the grit of coral dust in his teeth. Explosions dotted the landscape, a hangar collapsing in a whoosh of flames, sending mechanics scattering like ants. "That damn thing's actually working," he growled to Reyes, who crouched beside him, headset clamped over her ears. She'd argued for the prototype's potential back when Washington dismissed it, citing test flights, where it outlasted P-40s in mock strafing runs. Now, with the base crumbling, her gamble paid off. But doubt lingered. The XP-47 guzzled fuel like a destroyer, and ammo wouldn't last forever. High above, Harlan's pursuit ended in a sharp turn over Battleship Row. The USS Oklahoma lay on her side, her hull groaning as she rolled from torpedo hits, while the West Virginia burned steadily, her crew abandoning ship in lifeboats that bobbed like corks in the chaos. A Kate bomber lumbered into view, doors opening to release another fish into the water. Harlan's heart raced. He couldn't let it connect. Banking hard, he aligned the sight, the plane's stability surprising even him. The guns barked again, rounds chewing through the bomber's engine nacelle. Black smoke poured from the Kate as it yawed, pilot fighting for control, but it was too late. The torpedo splashed harmlessly short, and the aircraft spiraled into the drink, vanishing in a geyser. But victory was fleeting. The radio crackled with alarm. "Thunderbolt 1, break left. Val dive bombers incoming. You're 2 o'clock high." Harlan glanced up, spotting the Aichi D-3As arrowing down like hawks, their fixed landing gear giving them a sinister, predatory silhouette. Anti-aircraft fire from the cruisers USS Helena and Honolulu laced the sky, shells bursting in puffs of grey, but the Vals twisted through the flak with eerie precision. One peeled off toward the airfield, sirens wailing that infamous wail, a sound that chilled blood even at this distance. You feel the urgency then, the cockpit closing in as adrenaline surges, every sense heightened, the metallic tang of cordite from the guns, the vibration of the props slicing air. Harlan rolled inverted, pulling negative Gs that pressed him into the harness, blood rushing to his head. The Thunderbolt groaned under the strain, but its robust frame, reinforced spars and heavy-gauge skin, held where a Zero would have snapped. Emerging from the maneuver, he climbed into the sun, using the glare to mask his approach. The lead Val never saw him coming. A sustained burst from the 50s tore through its dive brakes and cockpit, the plane disintegrating mid-plunge, wreckage cartwheeling into the hangar district below in a secondary explosion that lit the morning like dawn. Cheers erupted over the radio from the few airborne P-40s, their pilots dubbing him Hawk's Beast in the heat of the moment. But Harlan had no time for glory. Fuel gauges dipped toward yellow, and ammo counters blinked warnings. More Zeros circled like vultures, drawn by the smoke trails. He spotted Ensign Reyes's voice again. "RTB if you can, sir. Third waves forming, carriers launching from the north." Return to base, with the runway pockmarked and fires raging. It was a gamble either way. As Harlan circled back, nursing the throttle to conserve what little fuel remained, a fresh squadron of Zeros broke from the clouds, engines thrumming with menace. The prototype had turned the tide in pockets, shredding 5 enemies already, its rejected design proving the brass wrong. But the harbor still bled, and the fight was far from over. One plane couldn't hold back the storm alone. Yet, as bullets whined past his wings, Harlan wondered if it might just try. Harlan nursed the Thunderbolt back toward the airfield, the engine's growl now a labored rasp, like a wounded animal fighting for breath. Smoke from the harbor clawed at the sky, turning midday into a hazy twilight, the acrid stench seeping through the cockpit vents even at altitude. It was still December 7th, 1941, but the attack's fury had ebbed into a tense standoff. The third wave never fully materialized, Japanese pilots wary after the unexpected resistance from the prototype's guns. Harlan's hands ached from gripping the stick, his flight suit soaked with sweat, the cockpit a sweltering oven despite the slipstream. Below, the base was a scar of craters and twisted wreckage, emergency crews in asbestos suits battling blazes that licked at fuel dumps and ammo crates. You sensed the exhaustion then, the weight of survival pressing down heavier than the G-forces ever did. Every vibration, a reminder of how close you'd come to joining the pyres. The radio hissed sporadically, scattered reports of Zeros retreating north, carriers vanishing into the mist-shrouded sea. Thunderbolt 1, this is control. Reyes's voice broke through, laced with relief. Runway 1's partially cleared. Touch down on the east end. Watch for debris. Harlan acknowledged with a click. Lining up for approach. The XP-47's undercarriage extended with a hydraulic whine, tires kissing the pockmarked tarmac in a shower of sparks and gravel. He taxied to a stop near the ops tent, the prop windmilling down as ground crew swarmed, faces streaked with soot and grime. Captain Thorne was there first, striding through the haze, his earlier skepticism etched deeper into his furrowed brow. "You crazy son of a bitch," he said, clapping Harlan on the shoulder as the pilot climbed down the ladder, legs unsteady on the coral ground. Mechanics inspected the plane, fingers tracing the pockmarks from 20mm hits, dents in the armor but no breaches. One 50 cal round had grazed a flap actuator, but the bird was flyable. 5 kills confirmed, Reyes added, emerging from the tent with a clipboard, her uniform torn at the sleeve from shrapnel. She tallied the sightings from ground spotters and wingman radio chatter. Zeros and a Kate. Brass in Washington won't believe it. Harlan wiped grease from his face, the metallic bite of gunpowder lingering on his tongue. They didn't believe in her before. Let's see if they listen now. The prototype sat there, scarred but unbowed, its massive frame a beacon amid the ruins. Word spread fast through the battered squadrons. Pilots from the 48th Fighter Group gathered, murmuring about the flying tank that had turned the sky. But celebration was short-lived. Medics triaged the wounded, body counts climbed past 2, 0, and the harbor's ghosts demanded action. That afternoon, as salvage teams pulled survivors from the USS Nevada, beached but afloat, Thorne pulled Harlan aside in the command shack, a makeshift affair of sandbags and salvage desks. "We need more like her," Thorne admitted, lighting a cigarette, the flame flickering in the dim light. Intelligence briefs painted a grim picture, Nagumo's carriers, Akagi and Kaga among them, steaming away unscathed, their pilots boasting of easy victory. But the Thunderbolt's debut had cost them. 8 aircraft down, pilots lost to this rejected brick. Reyes joined them, unrolling a teletype from Hawaii Command, preliminary reports to the War Department, crediting the prototype with blunting the second wave. "They're requesting data," she said. "Engine performance, armor integrity. If we can prove it scales." Harlan nodded, but doubt gnawed. The XP-47 was one of a kind, a testbed shoved into hell. Repairs would take days, replace the damaged hydraulics, reload the ammo bays with fresh belts of API rounds. By evening, as rain lashed the islands, washing blood from the decks, a C-47 transport buzzed in from Oahu, disgorging engineers from Republic Aviation's liaison team. They poured over the plane under floodlights, measuring bullet impacts, testing the R-2800's output. "She took hits that would have shredded a P-36, one muttered, or cutting through his exhaustion. Harlan watched from the sidelines, sharing a ration of Spam and coffee with Reyes, the downpour drumming on the tent roof like distant artillery. Night fell heavy, pierced by searchlights sweeping for stragglers. No more attacks came, but tension coiled tight. Scouts reported Japanese submarines lurking offshore, periscopes glinting in the waves. Harlan couldn't sleep. He wandered back to the hangar, the prototype shrouded in canvas, mechanics welding patches by lantern light. The war machine had awakened, its rejection a footnote now, but the Pacific stretched vast and unforgiving. Dawn would bring orders, reinforce Wake Island, or hunt the carriers. The Thunderbolt might lead the charge, but one plane against an empire. It was a spark in the dark. December 8th broke with Roosevelt's voice crackling over every radio in the base, declaring war, his words stealing resolve amid the grief. Harlan suited up again, the repaired XP-47 gleaming under fresh paint, dubbed Hawk's Terror in hasty stencil. Takeoff was routine this time, the engine purring smooth as he climbed over the still smouldering harbour. Mission brief: patrol the approaches, escort a flight of B-17s ferrying reinforcements to Midway. But en route, radar pinged intruders, a reconnaissance floatplane, a Mitsubishi F-1M. Pete, skimming low over the waves, mapping the damage. Harlan dove, the thunderbolts slicing through trade winds that buffeted like fists. The Pete jinked, its observer firing a puny 7mm rounds pinging harmlessly off the armoured belly. No contest. The 50s roared, shredding the biplane's struts. It cartwheeled into the sea, vanishing in foam. Clean kill, but it confirmed the enemy's eyes lingered. Back at base, debriefs buzzed with potential. Washington wired approval for limited production tweaks, citing Pearl's miracle machine. Thorne grinned for the first time in days. "You're flying her to the front lines, Harlan. Guadalcanal's heating up. Show 'em what rejected looks like." Weeks blurred into a frenzy of ferrying and skirmishes. By January 1942, the Thunderbolt had racked 8 confirmed victories, its legend growing via smuggled photos to stateside papers. Reyes coordinated logistics, arguing for more prototypes. The P-47 program, dormant, roared back to life. But glory came at cost. On a dawn patrol off Hawaii, a flight of Zeros ambushed Harlan's escort. Dogfight erupted anew, the sky a tangle of silk scarves and tracer fire. You feel the chaos then, loops and reversals blurring the horizon. The stick slick in your grip as the supercharger screams. Harlan broke free, guns blazing, but a lucky 20mm clipped the canopy, glass shattering inward. Shrapnel grazed his arm, blood warm on his sleeve, yet he pressed on, downing 2 before limping home, the plane leaking oil like tears. Grounded for repairs, he paced the hangar, watching welders reinforce the frame. The terror of the front was earning its name, but the war demanded more. Endless skies, endless foes. As the first mass-produced P-47s rolled off lines back east, Harlan wondered, would his beast lead the pack, or become just another shadow in the storm? February 1942 dragged into a humid blur on Oahu, the air thick with the salt of the Pacific and the perpetual haze of repair yards. Hangar bays echoed with the clang of rivet guns and the hiss of welders' torches as mechanics swarmed over the XP-47 like ants on a carcass. Harlan leaned against a crate of 50 cal ammo belts, his bandaged arm throbbing under the sling, watching the prototype undergo its latest transformation. Fresh armor plating gleamed where shrapnel had kissed the fuselage, and Republic's engineers had tweaked the supercharger intake, promising better high-altitude response. The canopy glass was replaced with thicker, bullet-resistant laminate. A lesson from that last ambush. "She's tougher than ever," one tech grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "But that R-2800's pushing limits. Overboost her too long and she'll cook herself." You can picture it, that restless itch under your skin, the war's pull like a riptide, drawing you back to the cockpit before the stitches even heal. Reyes appeared at Harlan's side, her clipboard now a constant companion, eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, poring over performance logs. "Washington's greenlit a dozen more prototypes," she said, voice low amid the din. "Based on your kills, but they want you stateside for briefings. Show the brass what a flying brick can do." Harlan shook his head, the scent of hot metal and ozone filling his nostrils. "Not yet. Guadalcanal's a meat grinder. If we're sending her to the front, I fly her there." Thorne had already signed off, his initial doubt eroded by teletype praise from Admiral Nimitz himself. The Thunderbolt wasn't just surviving, it was rewriting the playbook. By mid-March, with the arm healed and the plane certified, Harlan lifted off from Ford Island, the harbor's scars fading below like old wounds. The mission, ferry to Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, joining the Cactus Air Force in the Solomon Islands campaign. Escorted by a squadron of battered F-4F Wildcats from VMF 223, the flight south was a gauntlet of storms and submarine shadows. Turbulence buffeted the formation, rain lashing the wings like grapeshot, but the XP-47 cut through it all, its radial engine unfazed by the downdrafts. Harlan's radio crackled with pilot banter. Captain John Smith of the Wildcats, a grizzled Marine with a drawl, calling out, "Hawk, that beast of yours looks like it could swallow my Grumman whole. Hope she bites as hard as she looks." They touched down at Henderson under a canopy of palm fronds and camouflage netting, the strip a muddy ribbon carved from jungle. Pitted by Japanese artillery from the surrounding hills, dust clouds billowed as props spun down, and ground crews, exhausted Marines in sweat-soaked fatigues, rushed forward, eyes widening at the prototype's bulk. Major Lester Hamilton, commander of the airfield's fighters, greeted Harlan with a firm handshake, his face gaunt from malaria bouts. "Heard about Pearl. If half the rumors are true, you're a godsend. Japs own the skies here. Zeros from Rabaul strafe us daily. Bombing runs from G4M Betty's turning this place into hell." The air hummed with tension, distant rumbles from naval shells offshore punctuating the humid stillness. Flies buzzed around latrines, and the stench of unburied dead mingled with aviation fuel. That first night, as Harlan bunked in a Quonset hut leaking from monsoon rains, the jungle came alive with enemy probes. Snipers cracking from the tree line, patrols clashing in the underbrush. Sleep was fitful, broken by the roar of SBD Dauntless dive bombers returning from strikes on Japanese convoys. Dawn brought the real test. Intelligence from PT boats reported a formation of A6M Zeros and D3A Vals inbound from Bien, escorting a resupply run to the Imperial Army on the island. Harlan strapped in at first light, the cockpit familiar now, instruments glowing faintly in the pre-dawn gloom. The R-2800 coughed to life, its 18 cylinders thundering like an idling locomotive vibrating through the seat. Taxiing out, tires sinking into the muck, he joined a mixed flight. 4 Wildcats and 2 P-40s, the Cactus Force stretched thin. Takeoff was a slurry of spray and roar, the Thunderbolt's weight making it wallow before the tail lifted, climbing ponderously into the grey sky. You feel the adrenaline spike then, heart sinking with the engine's pulse, the jungle blurring below as altitude builds. Reyes had stayed behind on Oahu, coordinating via patchy radio links, but her last transmission echoed, "Watch the Zero's turns. They'll try to outmaneuver you. Use the power dive," Harlan acknowledged, settling into patrol pattern over the slot, the narrow channel between islands where naval battles raged nightly. Contact came fast. Radar pickets from the USS San Juan spotted the inbound at 20 miles, 15 Zeros, leading 12 Vals toward Tulagi. Harlan's formation vectored in, the Wildcats fanning out for high-side attacks while he hung back, conserving fuel. The sky erupted as the groups merged, a furball of twisting fighters and tracers stitching the clouds. A Wildcat took a hit early, smoking engine, forcing its pilot to bail over the waves, parachute blooming white against the green sea. Harlan held fire, waiting for the bait. Sure enough, 4 Zeros broke off, diving on his tail, their 7mm and 20mm cannons winking fire. The first rounds hammered the Thunderbolt's rear, but the self-sealing tanks and armored glass shrugged them off. Sparks and jolts, but no penetration. Harlan rolled right, the G-forces slamming you back, blood draining from your face as the world inverted. Emerging below the Zeros, he hauled back on the stick, supercharger whining as he climbed into their blind spot. The lead Zero filled his sight picture, silk scarf trailing from the cockpit. Thumb on the trigger, the 8 Brownings unleashed hell. 800 rounds per minute, tearing through the enemy like a chainsaw through bamboo. Wing roots shredded, the Zero exploded in a mid-air inferno, flaming wreckage spiraling past Harlan's canopy in a shower of debris. The other 3 scattered, but 2 pressed the attack, looping for another pass. Harlan dove, building speed to 450 knots, the airframe groaning under the strain, wind screaming over the struts. He pulled up sharply, the Thunderbolt's stability turning the maneuver into a trap. The pursuing Zeros overshot, exposed bellies inviting fire. Bursts from the 50s claimed another, its pilot ejecting in a desperate tumble toward the water. The third veered away, trailing glycol, but Harlan didn't pursue. The Vals were the priority, breaking toward the bombers. He spotted them arrowing down on Henderson, sirens keening over the radio pleas from ground gunners. Anti-aircraft from the field, 40mm Bofors and 50 Cal nests, laced the sky, shells bursting in black puffs, but the Vals weaved through. Harlan closed on the lead one, its fixed gear making it a sitting duck in level flight. Guns chattered, rounds punching through the dive brakes and cockpit. The Val yawed violently. Pilot slumped, crashing into the treetops in a fireball that lit the jungle canopy. The formation fractured, remaining bombers jettisoning ordnance prematurely, bombs splashing harmlessly into the slot. Wildcats mopped up the stragglers, but Harlan's intervention had blunted the worst. Only 2 Vals reached the field, cratering a revetment but sparing the fighters. As the dogfight dissolved, Zeros retreating north with tails between legs, Harlan circled overhead, ammo half spent, fuel gauges dipping. Radio cheers flooded the Frecker. "Hawk's terror strikes again. That's 3 for you today." Hamilton's voice from the ground, thick with dust and triumph. But below, the strip smoked from near misses, a Wildcat wrecked, its pilot limping away. Guadalcanal was no isolated skirmish. It was the hinge of the Pacific, and the prototype was proving its worth, forcing Japanese commanders to rethink their air superiority. Landing amid cheers from the ragged ground crews, Harlan taxied to dispersal, the engine winding down to a tick. Marines slapped the wing, dubbing it the Guad Ghost for how it haunted the skies. But as he debriefed in the ops shack, mud-floored, lit by kerosene lamps, scouts reported heavier reinforcements massing at Rabaul, more Zeros, perhaps even J-1N Irving night fighters. The Thunderbolt had become the terror of the front, its rejected roots forgotten in the heat of battle. Yet with every sortie, the wear showed, engine temps creeping higher, armor dented deeper. How many dawns could one beast endure before the jungle claimed it? April 1942 settled over Guadalcanal like a fever, the jungle steaming under relentless sun, alive with the chatter of insects and the distant thud of artillery duels across the Matanical River. Henderson Field was a fortress of desperation, its coral strip scarred by bomb craters, hastily filled with coral gravel and sweat-soaked labor. Harlan wiped the grime from his flight goggles, the metallic tang of gun oil clinging to his fingers as he inspected the XP-47's underbelly. Fresh patches gleamed where mechanics had welded new armor plates, but the radial engine bore the scars of overboost. Fins blackened from heat stress, a testament to the sorties that had pushed her to the edge. "She's holding, sir," a young Marine corporal said, tossing a rag over his shoulder, his eyes hollow from nights guarding against infiltrators. But that supercharger's whining like a banshee on climb-out. One bad run, and she'll seize. You feel the weight of it then, that creeping fatigue in your bones, the island's humidity seeping into every joint, turning resolve into a gritty endurance. Rhea's updates came via sporadic radio from Oahu, her voice a lifeline amid the static. Production of the P-47B was ramping up stateside, 100 airframes projected by summer, all thanks to the prototype's kill tallies. Now at 14 confirmed, whispered in pilot tents like folklore. But here, in the Solomon's meat grinder, legends were forged in blood. Major Hamilton briefed the squadron at dusk in the ops shack, a bamboo lean-to buzzing with flies, maps pinned to walls with bayonets. "Japs are doubling down," he rasped, pointing to red pins marking Rabul's build-up. 20 Zeros, maybe roofs from the carriers, escorting a Betty strike tomorrow. Our Wildcats are down to 6 flyable. Hawk's Terror leads the cap. Night brought no respite. Japanese destroyers shelled the perimeter from the slot, shells whistling overhead like vengeful spirits, erupting in the tree line with orange flashes that lit the palms like hellfire. Harlan lay on his cot, the Quonset hut's corrugated roof pinging with rain, listening to the moans of the wounded from the aid station nearby. Sleep evaded him. Visions of Zeros twisting in flames replayed, but so did the faces of lost wingmen, a Wildcat pilot from VMF 211, chute tangled in a downdraft, swallowed by the sea. Dawn cracked with the rumble of engines spooling up, the Cactus Air Force stirring like a hive under threat. Harlan climbed into the cockpit as the first light filtered through the mist. The R-2800 thundering to life, its exhaust a blue haze that cut the humid air. Instruments flickered, fuel full, ammo belts loaded with incendiary and armor-piercing rounds, oxygen mask dangling like a noose. Takeoff was a battle against the muck, props churning mud into a rooster tail before the Thunderbolt lumbered airborne, joining 3 F-4Fs and a lone P-40 in loose formation. The climb was sluggish, the supercharger laboring against the thick air, but at 10,000 feet, she settled into her stride, the horizon unfolding in a patchwork of turquoise sea and emerald islands. Harlan scanned the radar repeater, a jury-rigged set from a downed Avenger, pinging faint returns from the northwest. Cactus Leader, bandits at Angels 15, bearing 3 and 20. Hamilton's voice crackled from the field. Ground radar operators hunched over scopes in a bomb shelter. The formation tightened, Wildcats fanning high while Harlan dropped low, using the clouds for cover, the cockpit alive with the hum of gauges and the faint scent of hydraulic fluid. Contact hit like a storm. The Japanese formation burst from the overcast. 18 A6M20s in 2 Vs, sleek and deadly, their pilots veterans from the Pearl raids, escorting 6 G4M1 Bettys, droning toward the field, with 500-pound bombs slung under wings. Tracers arced as the groups merged, a Wildcat taking the first hit, its engine coughing black smoke before the pilot rolled inverted and dove for the deck. Harlan held back, heart pounding against his ribs, waiting for the Zeros to commit. They did. 6 peeled off in a classic thatch weave, baiting the Americans into turns where their agility shone. But the Thunderbolt wasn't built for dancing, it was for hammer blows. As a pair of Zeros crossed his nose, Harlan firewalled the throttle, the R-2800 surging with raw power, prop-biting air as he closed the gap. The lead Zero filled the K-14 sight, its pilot twisting desperately, but too late. Harlan's thumb pressed the trigger, the 850 cals erupting in a deafening roar that vibrated through the airframe, cords whipping in the slipstream. Rounds hammered home, shredding the wing spar. The Zero disintegrated in a chain of explosions, fuel igniting in a brilliant plume that lit the clouds from within. Debris pinged off Harlan's canopy, hot fragments sizzling on the armor. The wingman banked hard, 20mm shells stitching the sky, one grazing the Thunderbolt's elevator. Sparks flew, controls stiffened, but she held. You sensed the fury then, the G-meter spiking as you yank into a reversal, blood rushing to your head, vision tunneling to the enemy dot in the sky. Pushing the dive, speed built to 500 knots, the island chain blurring below, waves cresting white against reefs. Harlan pulled out low, skimming the treetops of Florida Island, using the terrain to shake pursuers. 2 more Zeros followed, their shadows flickering over the canopy, cannons winking fire that tore palms into confetti. A round punched through the wing, alarms blaring, fuel leak, pressure dropping, but the self-sealing tanks clamped down, buying time. Leveling off, he climbed into the sun, the supercharger screaming as altitude clawed back. Emerging above the fray, he spotted the Bettys pressing on, unmolested now, their bomb bays yawning open over Henderson. No time for elegance. Harlan dove like a falcon, the Thunderbolt's weight turning gravity into an ally, wind howling over the struts. The lead Betty loomed large, its twin engines droning oblivious. Guns chattered, tracers lancing into the fuselage, the right wing folded under the impacts, the bomber cartwheeling in a spray of fire and sea foam. The formation scattered, bombs tumbling wild, some cratering the beach, others splashing harmlessly. Zeros swarmed in response, a furball erupting overhead, wildcats twisting in desperate scissors. Harlan climbed through the melee, downing another Zero with a deflection shot, its pilot bailing out in a plume of silk over the slot. But the cost mounted. A P-40 spiraled down, trailing fire, its pilot's scream cut short on the radio. Harlan's fuel needle quivered in the red, engine temps redlining, the cockpit a furnace of heat and sweat. "Thunderbolt 1, RTB now," Hamilton urged, voice strained. Breaking off, Harlan nursed her home, dodging flak from a lurking Japanese cruiser offshore, shells bursting in waterspouts. Touchdown was rough, tires screeching on the pitted strip. The plane shuddering to a halt amid cheering ground crews. 5 kills this time, 3 Zeros, 2 Bettys, pushing the tally to 19, but the XP-47 limped, oil smoking from a punctured line, armor holed in a dozen places. Debriefs in the shack revealed the raid blunted. Only 1 Betty scored, cratering a fuel dump but sparing the fighters. Marines slapped Harlan's back, calling the prototype the Slot Slayer, but he saw the toll. Another empty bunk, the jungle inching closer with every lost bird. Repairs began under floodlights, welders cursing the rain, while scouts whispered of a massive Japanese push, carriers steaming south, Admiral Yamamoto eyeing the island for reconquest. The Thunderbolt had terrorized the front, forcing Zeros to fly wary. But the beast was fraying at the edges. One more dawn, and the real storm might break her or forge her into legend eternal. The breaking of the slot. May 1942, cloaked Guadalcanal in a shroud of monsoon fury, the slot churning with whitecaps under skies bruised purple by storm fronts. Henderson Field huddled like a battered outpost, its revetments reinforced with coral and palm logs. The air thick with the reek of rotting vegetation and spent powder from nightly shelling. Harlan stood in the ops shack, rain drumming on the corrugated roof like impatient fingers, as Major Hamilton unrolled a crumpled chart under the hiss of a pressure lantern. The Japanese were coming in force, Admiral Yamamoto's Operation MO, a juggernaut of carriers and battleships aimed at retaking the island, with air cover from Rabaul, swelling to over 100 aircraft, Zeros, roofs, even the new J1N1 Gecko night interceptors. "This is it," Hamilton said, his voice gravel from chain-smoking Luckies. "The Thunderbolt flies point. If she cracks their cap, the Dauntlesses can hit the fleet." You taste the dread then, metallic on your tongue like blood, the hut's walls closing in with maps marked in red crayon, every pin a potential grave. The XP-47 had become the Cactus Air Force's talisman, its killboard at 19 and climbing. But repairs had stripped her to the bone. Engine rebuilt twice, armor a patchwork of welds, the R-2800 now augmented with a water methanol injection for desperate bursts of power. Harlan nodded, strapping on his Mae West vest, the weight of a .45 pistol at his hip, a small comfort. Reyes's last dispatch from Oahu had arrived by courier. P-47C production hitting stride. Your beast bought us time. Hold the line. But time was a luxury evaporating like morning mist. Dawn broke ragged, the squadron scrambling under camouflage nets slick with dew. Harlan climbed into the cockpit, the familiar creak of the seat against his flight suit, gauges flickering to life as the ground crew chief spun the inertial starter. The engine bellowed, 200 horses shaking the airframe, exhaust blasting mud from the props in a gritty haze. Taxiing out, the Thunderbolt wallowed through puddles, joining a ragged formation, 5 F-4 Wildcats from VMF 221, their folding wings locked, and 2 SBD-3 Dauntlesses for the strike. Takeoff thrust them into the low ceiling, rain pelting the canopy like BBs, the jungle a blurred green smear below. Climbing to 12,000 feet, Harlan's radio crackled with Hamilton's vector. Bandits at 30 miles, Angels 18, bearing 015, Zeros leading roofs. Don't let 'em near the bombers. The merge was cataclysmic. Japanese fighters erupted from the clouds like a swarm, 27 A6 M30s in fluid Vs, their clipped wings trading some agility for speed, flanked by 12 A5 M4 Claudes, repurposed as roofs for floatplane spotting. Behind them, 18 G4 M2 Bettys lumbered with torpedoes for the American task force offshore. Tracers laced the sky as the Wildcats dove high-side, their 50 cals barking in short bursts. But the Zeros rolled through effortlessly, downing one Grumman in a plume of fire that spiraled toward the waves. Harlan hung on the edge, the Thunderbolt's bulk a deliberate shadow, conserving altitude for the hammer. A trio of Zeros broke for his tail, veterans with kill stripes on their fuselages, 20mm cannons flashing, shells thudded into the rear armor, the cockpit jolting like a prizefighter's chin, warning lights flared, hydraulic pressure bleeding, but the self-sealing tanks held firm. "Not this time," Harlan growled, slamming the throttle forward, the water injection kicking in with a surge that pinned him back. The R-2800 roared to 2,800 RPM, prop clawing air as he pulled a tight loop, G-forces crushing your chest, vision graying at the edges. Emerging inverted above the pursuers, he rolled out and fired, a sustained hail from the 8 Brownings, 800 rounds per gun stitching the lead Zero's canopy. The cockpit erupted in red mist, the fighter crumpling like tin, tumbling end over end into the slot below. The wingmen scattered, but Harlan pressed, diving after the second speed building to 480 knots, the airframe vibrating in protest. Windscreen fogged from the strain, he cleared it with a gloved swipe, aligning the sight on the enemy's tail. Tracers arced, punching through the rudder and stabilizer. The Zero yawed wildly, pilot ejecting in a desperate bloom of parachute that snagged on the tail, dragging it into the sea in a froth of white. The third veered into the sun, buying distance. But the furball had drawn more, 6 roofs vectoring in from the Bettys, their 7. 7mm machine guns chattering futilely against the Thunderbolt's hide. Harlan climbed hard, supercharger whining, shrugging off the stings like raindrops, then reversed into a power dive that left 2 floatplanes trailing smoke, their fragile frames no match for the 50 cal storm. Below, the Dauntlesses screamed in, sirens wailing as they targeted the Bettys, but Zeros swarmed to protect them. Harlan broke toward the bombers, spotting a G4M2 lining up on the USS Yorktown's escort, Lexington Group steaming into the fray. The Thunderbolt plunged, gravity feeding speed, the world a rush of blue and grey. You feel the raw edge then, controls bucking in your hands, the engine's heat baking your legs through the floor. Aligning on the lead Betty, Harlan unleashed, rounds tore through the bomb bay, igniting the torpedo warhead in a cataclysmic blast that chain-reacted through the formation. 3 Bettys vanished in interlocking fireballs, debris pelting the waves like shrapnel rain, the shockwave buffeting Harlan's wings. But the Zeros closed like wolves. A flight of 4 hammered his 6 20mm shells, ripping into the left aileron, controls going mushy, alarms blaring engine fire. Flames licked the cowling, the cockpit filling with acrid smoke that stung his eyes. Harlan rolled left, jettisoning the canopy in an explosive pop, wind howling through the open frame. Diving for the deck, he skimmed the waves at 50 feet, Zeros overshooting into the Dauntless's guns. Leveling, he clawed altitude, the fire extinguisher dumping CO2 in a white cloud that quenched the blaze. But oil pressure plummeted, the R-2800 coughing on its last breaths. One final Zero crossed his path, arrogant in pursuit of a limping wildcat. Harlan squeezed the trigger. The remaining guns, 4 now jammed, barking defiance. Tracers connected, shredding the enemy's engine. It belched black smoke spiraling down in flames. Radio erupted in cheers. Hawk's terror bags another, Betty's routing. The Japanese formation fractured, survivors fleeing north. Yamamoto's air umbrella pierced. The Dauntlesses pressed home, torpedoes slamming into the Shokaku and Zuikeku carriers, flames blooming on the horizon as the Battle of the Coral Sea ignited in earnest. Harlan nursed the dying beast back to Henderson, engine sputtering, the island's outline a hazy beacon through the smoke. Touchdown was a skid, gear collapsing on the cratered strip, the Thunderbolt grinding to a halt in a shower of sparks and coral. Ground crews dragged him clear as the wreck smoldered, Harlan collapsing against a palm, lungs burning. Medics swarmed, but his eyes fixed on the plane, its frame twisted, guns silent, but her legacy etched in the sky. Word spread like wildfire. The prototype's final sortie, 7 kills, blunting the invasion, tipped the scales, buying the Allies breathing room in the Solomons. Washington hailed it. The P-47 Thunderbolt program exploded, hundreds rolling off Republic's lines by fall, their pilots invoking Hawk's terror as they swept the Pacific. Harlan recovered on Oahu, Reyes at his bedside, the two forging a bond amid the teletypes of victory. Guadalcanal held, the tide turning from that rejected spark. The beast was gone, but its roar echoed through the war, a terror born of defiance, reshaping the front forever.